Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Straight Science. Straight Science is an evening science presentation put on by University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus. And tonight we're in the main building, Nagazra Conference Room, and also by co-produced by University of Alaska Fairbanks Alaska Sea Grant right here. And both Northwest Campus and Alaska Sea Grant, we are public servants of the Bering Strait region. We serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, St. Lawrence Island Yupik, and Central Yupik peoples. So tonight we're closing out 2024 Straight Science, and we'll pick her back up again in January 2025. But tonight we have a very Nome based Straight Science. And tonight we actually have Brynn Parr. She is a wildlife biologist, research biologist with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game here in Nome, Region 5. And she's going to be, we've done so many of these that are remote because everyone's remote. It's so nice to actually have someone come over to campus, and a few people have shown, so that's very nice. She's going to be giving us the results of a study we did hear 2 years ago about, what was that on the survival rates of the young. And now we're going to hear tonight, because they've been doing more research looking at movements. So we're going to hear the results of her many years of research on our local muskox. And I already have a question at the end. Because we just did the bird count. And there's all kinds of crazy weather and things like that. So it'll be a weather-related question. With that, we're going to hand it over to Brynn Parr. And there's no better to talk to us about muskox research in the Nome area and the Seward Peninsula. Take it away, Brynn. We're so glad to have you. And thanks, everyone, for being patient, because our recordings are fascinating tonight, getting in the groove. Thank you so much. Take it away, Brynn.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brynn. I'm going to turn my video off and then start sharing my screen here. As Gay said, I'm going to talk about movements. Thank you all so much for coming, both in person and online. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your evening. So there's a couple different ways we can look at movements. One will be the population expanding across the Seward Peninsula, and that's using our managers' population surveys, abundance surveys that they do every other year, every third year. And then we can look at movements on an individual level based off of some of the collars. So if you like maps and dots on maps, this is the place for you. We're not going to have too many fun pictures, but lots and lots of maps. So to get started here, this is a map of the Seward Peninsula. The black outline is the subunit boundaries, and that red dashed line is an invisible boundary for where they initially started looking for muskox. So in the early years of muskox on the peninsula, the two stars are the release locations when they reintroduced muskox in 1970 and 1981. And in the early years, muskox hadn't moved too far to the east on the peninsula. So that red line that runs vertically across the map there was kind of as far east as we would typically search for muskox. And this was done in a minimum count method. So that meant our managers flew anywhere they knew or suspected muskox to be and counted them. So this is our 1992 results. All the red dots on a map are where a muskox was located. A red dot could mean a single mature bull. It could mean a group of 75 plus, mixed age and sex. There's no distinction between the dots. In the bottom of these maps, on the bottom left, you'll see groups. That's the number of groups or the number of red dots on the map for that given year. And then the minimum count is how many animals, how many muskox were counted in those 52 groups. So in 1992, when they tallied up all of the muskox seen in those 52 groups, they came up with 706 muskox. So fast forward 2 years to 1994, the distribution is pretty similar, but the number of groups has gone up to 75, and that minimum count's bumped up to 925. 1996, more of the same, similar distribution, a few more groups, a few more muskox. 1998, we see quite a few more groups, and we've bumped up by about 500 muskox. There's also some cool things to see on this one. Again, that's that red dashed line where typically muskox weren't too far to the east of there. But this time around, we saw these two groups that were way out there. And if we measure straight line distance from the release locations at Feather River and Port Clarence out to these two dots, that's approximately 140 miles straight line distance from the release location to those two dots that are 28 years later. So that's some impressive movement. Moving forward to 2000, again, the number of groups goes up, so does the minimum count. We see more of the same in 2002 with more smattering of groups out there to the east, not only in the northern peninsula, but there on the southern peninsula as well. We see continued dots marching across the landscape in 2005. Groups goes up again, as does the minimum count. And in 2007, again, more of the same. It's kind of a broken record at the moment, but groups are really moving. We've got 186 groups that were counted this year, totaling just under 2,700 muskox. And we see dots way out there to the east. So this is 245 miles straight line from Port Clarence, or 230 miles straight line from the Feather River release location. And if we're talking about game management units, these muskox are now in unit 23, and they're right on the edge of the 21 Delta and 24 Delta units, which in regional terms is the border of Region 3 and Region 5. So it adds some fun complications because they're moving into areas where they hadn't historically been, and managers over there weren't necessarily ready for them to come marching over. After 2007, with seeing all those dots march across the landscape, it became pretty clear that we needed to change our method. Instead of just going out to where we knew our suspected muskox were and counting them, we needed to come up with something a little more repeatable, and that was more evenly distributed across the landscape. So we switched to this distance sampling method, where we drew these lines on the peninsula, spaced every 4 to 5 miles apart. And then we would fly them from one end to the other, and we would count all the muskox that we saw along the line. This method is designed to miss muskox. You are not supposed to see every animal on the landscape because it's just impossible. You're not going to see the muskox on the backside of a hill if you're flying a straight line. So this method is more of an estimate instead of a minimum count. It's taking how many muskox were seen, how far they were from those transects, and then somehow it factors in for the animals we didn't see, and it spits out an estimate. So in 2010, the first year we conducted the distance sampling method, this is what we saw. The number of groups bumped up once again, this time to 188 different groups. And the population estimate this time was just over 2,900 muskox. We also had muskox popping up in 22 alpha for the first time in this survey. We had many people from the public calling and telling us that muskox were seen out there. We just hadn't yet documented them during these surveys, but by switching to this abundance method, or this distance sampling, excuse me, and very intentionally flying lines in that area, we did start to document muskox down there. In 2012, distribution stays similar, but for the first time, we've seen a decrease in the number of groups and a decrease in the population estimate. 2015, a little bit more of the same. Similar distribution, a few less groups, a few less muskox. 2017, a little bit of a rebound year. The number of groups and muskox went up a little bit, but distribution is still there. You can see there's a red dot way out to the east, very definitively in Region 3 this time. In 2021, things stayed pretty stable in terms of the groups and the estimate, but we saw some really far out groups this time too. So that dot in the upper right corner is 280 miles straight line distance from Port Clarence. And the one at the bottom of the map there is 250 miles if you go straight across the peninsula, right across the top of that water, and then go down. So these animals are moving long distances. We don't know that it's the same animals. You know, I don't think there's a 60-year-old or 50-year-old muskox that was released on Port Clarence and is now out there in Unit 23, but certainly generations have come along and have continued to move on. And this is our most recent map from 2024. Again, more of the same. The distribution is still pretty scattered now entirely across the peninsula. The number of groups and the estimate are down just a little bit from 2021, but because it is an estimate, there are confidence intervals in there and they overlap. So from 2012 to 2024, we consider the population to be stable. And now if we put all of those dots on one map at the same time to really overwhelm you, and this is anywhere a muskox was documented during these abundant surveys from 1992 to 2024. And a reminder, these two spots are where the releases occurred and the muskox just moved. I mean, there's no real reason to keep them all out to the west. And as the population grows, they need to find new areas. And they've certainly done that and expanded well beyond the border of the Seward Peninsula and gone out over into the mainlands. Okay, shifting gears a little bit now to using our collars. Our collaring program, if you've joined in for any of my Strait Sciences before, you've heard this, but we'll touch on it briefly in case there's anybody new. This project began in 2008, and it was used by our managers as an additional tool to monitor the population. So in particular, they wanted to keep tabs on it in years that they either didn't have a survey scheduled or that scheduled survey didn't happen due to weather or some other unforeseen circumstance. So by putting collars on the adult females, they get information on the female survival, the cause-specific mortality, what is killing those animals, and information on their movements. In 2021, we were able to take this really solid program they'd started and kind of revamp it a little bit by shifting over to GPS collars. And those GPS collars just allow us to get more information, the same information. We still get survival, we still get notifications so we can go out and find what killed that animal, but we get a lot better movement information. These collars are collecting between 1 and 4 locations a day. If that animal dies, we're getting an email instantly. So instead of waiting till the next time we can go radio track when the weather is good, we're getting that email notification, even if it's in the middle of a blizzard. So we can get out and try to investigate that mortality as soon as reasonably possible. There are things like bacteria and viruses that can be leave the body, so you can't detect them after only 24 hours or 48 hours. So getting there as quickly as we can after something dies gives us the best chance of figuring out what happened. In order to collar the muskox, we use a combination of immobilization drugs to dart them from either the ground or from a helicopter. When we have them on the ground, when they've gone down, we put a blindfold over their eyes to keep debris out of their eyes and to help keep them calm. We'll put on an ear tag for visual identification in case we ever have to go recapture that animal. We'll put the collar on. We are constantly monitoring their heart rate, their respiration rate, their temperatures. If everything is going well, we'll take some samples for health monitoring. We'll weigh them. And then at the very end, we can reverse those immobilization drugs so that the animal is able to stand up and honestly run away from us. They don't very often walk. They're ready to get away. So they take off running and they're back to themselves. And with these GPS collars, as soon as that animal runs away, we start getting a beautiful hot mess of dots on a map. All of the different colors on this map are associated with a different individual cow that has a GPS collar on it. And you can see that they're pretty centralized in the southern Seward Peninsula right now. That's because we are working on recapturing and recollaring all of the cows still wearing a VHF collar. Once that is done, we will try to reach out and get collars in some of those big bare areas right now. But it can be really hard to see what's going on with all of the dots overlaid on each other. So if we animate it, this is January through December of a single year. Again, color coordinated for individuals. And you can see how they move around. It's on a loop, so it'll loop back to the same January. In the winter months, there's not a lot of movement. In summer, like right now, there's quite a bit. but by the end of November, December, January, those cold months, they're not moving much. And that's in part due to the biological makeup of muskox. Their metabolism physically slows down so that they don't have to move as much in the wintertime. And in the summer, when they are moving around more, they're consuming higher quality vegetation. So they're able to replenish their body stores and really pack on the fat. And so the slower metabolism in the winter, combined with all of that fat, allows them to really not do much in the wintertime. They can just kind of hang out in one spot and survive. It can still be a little overwhelming, all these colors that are now moving on a map. So we'll look at a couple individuals just by themselves. So now everybody's going to be red, but this is one cow, all of her movements for 2 consecutive years. And so all of these dots are where she had been documented. This one is really fun because she went in and out of groups with another GPS collar. So not all of the dots are going to be red. Here is blue dots. This is a separate GPS collared cow over the same 2-year time frame. And you can see that there's spots where they were together and spots where they were separate. And if we animate this 2-year time frame, we initially collared them in different groups. They came together. They split up. They came back together. Hung out together for quite a while, and then they split up again. And this is on a loop as well, so you're going to see the same thing. It's just really interesting because a lot of times we think muskox are in a group and they stay with that group and that is their group for life. And we see that that's not the case with these GPS collars. They weren't together when we collared them. We collared them the same day in different groups. They very quickly did come together, and then they've shown that they like each other, and then maybe there's a fight or they just decide to go their separate ways for a little bit, and then they find their way back to each other. Here's another cow. This one was collared up outside of Brevig, and this is again 2 years of data for her. She's a little more clustery. She kind of seems to like to hang out in an area for a long amount of time. We'll go ahead and animate her as well.
Is there a season on these?
I didn't put it on these maps. I
Or is
apologize.
it wintertime she'd be holding? And
Yeah.
It's really summertime.
By and large, when those dots aren't moving much, it's winter time. So right now is winter. And then when you start to see big jumps and like this will be summertime.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I do apologize. I should have put the months on there. Here's another cow. This one is also fun. She walked out to Sledge Island one May. So this is again 2 years of data for one particular cow. We got the notification. Well, we were looking at the locations. We saw that there was this GPS collared cow out towards Sledge Island. And we thought, well, that's kind of weird. That's not where they belong. And we had our regional supervisor hop in a plane, and he flew out there to get eyes on them. And he actually found them on the ice. They weren't on the island itself. They were on the ice. And when we zoomed in and looked at her locations later, all of the locations were on the ice. She hung out there for 3 days, and then she came back to the mainland. So if we animate her locations, this is what we see. So this would be winter. Now we're in summer. Back to winter, summer. So she's done some much bigger movements than some of those other cows that we've looked at so far. Here's another cow. This one also seems to like to cluster. So she'll be in one area for months on end, and then she'll make a huge movement over just a few days, and then she'll hang out in a new area for months on end. So if we animate her locations, you can see she comes into Nome, she does spend time in Nome, and then she moves out again. So again on loop, so this is her movements, is again the same movements. This cow I think is fascinating because she very explicitly walks around Nome. You can kind of see in the bottom of the map, there's like a little arc of red dots, and Nome is right in the middle of that. So if we animate her movements, you'll see that arching around Nome right here as she moves out to the west. And she has been, in the 2 years shown, one of our biggest movers. She's covered some of the greatest distances of the GPS collars that we've had out there so far. Few more. This cow has spent all of the 2 years on this map out to the east, really covering that section of the peninsula pretty well. We animate her movements. This is what we see. And then I think this is the last one I have for you. This cow, definitely clustered for probably a solid year and a half. She spent time in one area and then she decided to move. So if we animate her 2 years of data, that is what we see. Okay, now a little bit different take on things is we're going to zoom into one small area of the Seward Peninsula, and we're going to look at how many of these different GPS collars move through. And what I hope you will take away from this is that it is not always one muskox or one muskox group in an area. It's actually a whole variety of them that will come through, come to the exact same spot and utilize the resources in that area. So we'll just go through this. It's 2 months at a time. I don't know if online you can see the dates. You can, okay. So up at the top, it's November through December of 2021. These are all the locations for this particular cow. We're gonna go back to color coding different individuals. And the legend on the left will help us keep track of how many different cows are coming into the area.
But this is like a 20 miles square.
Yeah, this is roughly 25 across by 20 north to south. So in January and February, that blue cow mostly moves out and a red cow is coming in. March and April, the blue cow is now completely gone, but the red cow is still around. May and June, the red cow is left and now a green and purple cow have moved in. So if you're keeping track on the legend, that's 4 different cows now. July and August, it's still the purple and the green utilizing this area. September and October, it's getting a little more colorful. The red cow has come back, and we've also now seen for the first time a white cow, a yellow cow, and a teal colored cow. So this has been 1 year for this area, and that's 7 different cows who have come in and utilized the area. We know from looking at their movements in detail and from radio tracking that none of these 7 cows were in the same group. So that's at least 7 different groups that came in and utilized this area as well. And again, we're only looking at GPS collared cows. I can't tell you how many non-collared groups were in here or how many VHF collared groups were in here because we just don't have the same resolution of data for those VHF collared cows. So we'll keep going, same area. November, December of 2022, the red cow moved out. We have a lime green cow that has moved in along the bottom. January and February, everybody cleared out except for this teal cow. March and April, the teal cow is still there. The lime green and the white come back. May and June, our teal cow leaves the area and our lime green and our white are still hanging out. July and August, that teal cow comes back. The green, lime green and the white are still in the area as well. September and October, the lime green cow has left, and we have the teal, and the yellow cow now has come back in. So this is now 2 full years of data for this area. We only had 1 new cow come in. We had 5 cows from the first year come back or hang out in the area still. And that blue cow that we started with has not come back at all. So we've got 1 more year of data. November and December of 23, everybody clears out except for the teal cow. January and February, still the teal cow utilizing the area. Same for March and April of 2024.
Ice thing.
In June, the white cow makes a reappearance, and we see a black cow, and behind a few of those black dots, there's a little hot pink color showing. That actually, the hot pink cow and the black cow were in the same group while they were in this section of the map frame. Everybody else so far has remained in separate groups. July and August, our black and our pink gal and their group presumably leave. And we still have the white and the teal. And then September and October, we get a few more coming in. So we have this darker blue on the left. We've got a salmon color and a different shade of teal that doesn't look very good at the moment out there to the right. And these, again, were in different groups. So this is 3 years of 1 small area of the peninsula, and that's 13 different GPS collared cows that have come in. That makes 13 different cows and a minimum of 12 different groups that have come in and utilized this area. You can overlap all of these 3 years and all of those points. This is what it looks like. So you can kind of see those hot areas where muskox like to come back to, but as we walked through those 3 years, the muskox aren't utilizing the area at the same time. It's different groups at different times that will come to these hills or these valleys and utilize that area. Okay, one other way we can look at movement is through calf captures. So one of the studies that I did was looking at juvenile survival. We would go catch the baby muskox when they were just a few days old. And then we would catch them or their friends when they were 6 months old that fall. And by plotting those locations on a map of where we physically captured that animal, we have a number of them that we recaptured twice. So we caught it both as a baby and again 6 months later. So on this map, the little dots are where we caught that muskox as a baby, and the bigger dot with the same color is where we caught that muskox when it was 6 months old that fall. And there's a line connecting them so you can kind of track where these animals moved. There are some of them, like these circled in red, that didn't move much or didn't appear to move much. And the 6 months, we caught them less than 3 miles from where we caught them as a baby. Then we have muskox like this. This little lady moved 56 miles straight line distance from where we caught her as a brand new baby to where she was 6 months later. And this fella in yellow moved 62 miles, I believe, from where we caught him as a neonate to where we caught him as a 6-month-old calf. And what's really fascinating to me is that in those first 6 months of life, there's no rhyme or reason to the movements. We see calves moving south to north. We see them moving north to south, east to west, west to east. There's little movements like this calf out here, who literally we caught 10 yards from where we captured her as a baby. Like it was on the same little island next to the same pine tree. But this one is really cool because we had a GPS collared cow in her group, and it was a small group. And anytime we radio tracked that summer, that neonate calf collar was with that GPS collar. So if we look at that GPS collar's movements from May, the day that we captured that baby, to November, the day we recaptured it, this is what they did. So this is on a May to November loop. It's just repeating itself. But if we measure distance point to point throughout that 6 months, that cow, and very presumably that calf, moved over 220 miles. They ended up literally right back in the same spot. But they did a lot of movement that summer in the meantime. The GPS collaring and the neonate study didn't overlap too much, so there's only one other group that I can provide similar information for, and it's for this blue calf out to the west. This one, I'm a little less confident that the calf stayed with the cow just because it was a much bigger group. And anytime we were radio tracking that summer, although that neonate calf and that cow collar were always together, there were always other groups nearby. So I'm not convinced that they didn't pop back and forth. But if we animate that GPS collared cow's movements again from May, the day that we captured the calf as a baby, to November when we recaptured it at 6 months of age, this is what they did. And again, it's on the loop from May to November. They also covered over 200 miles. I think it was 211 straight line, point to point, but they obviously ended up in a different spot than where we initially captured them. So in summary, muskox move. They go across the peninsula, they search out new habitat, and they move a lot in the summertime too. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. They certainly all seem to slow down in the wintertime, but when the summer rolls around, their metabolism kicks back up, the snow goes away, they go all over the place. And some of them do like to hang out in one area for a while before they move on. Others just are passing through an area. They don't necessarily always go the same way. It's not like all of these animals are coming from the north to the south or vice versa. They're doing a little bit of everything, and we haven't yet detected a clear pattern or even a clear like set of patterns that we could assign animals to. There are some that seem to cluster, and there are some that seem to move. So I guess we could put them in those two categories, but they're not migratory like something like a caribou. They don't return to the same area every year to give birth or to spend the summer or to spend the winter. They just kind of seem to roam randomly. Next up, we do, like I mentioned before, we do want to get up into some of these currently empty areas and hang collars, but that's probably 2 years, if not further into the future, before we can get up there. But hopefully in another 2 years, I'll be back and can present some more data for you. I want to spend a quick second thanking everybody who has helped. Bering Air has been super instrumental when it comes to their helicopter services, getting us out there for the captures, helping us detect the mortalities and pick them up. Arctic Backcountry has been huge, helping us radio track. I don't think could do this without them. And then everybody listed for Fish and Game. This is present and past staff that has played some role, from very minor to super instrumental all throughout the course of my time here and with my research. So thank you to everybody listed here. And with that, I will open it up to any questions.
All right, so now you might want to put your video on,
Okay.
and there we go. And I'm going to Budinsky here for 1 sec and say now is that, since we're working tag teaming off this screen, now is the time that thank you very much, Brynn. And this is the time for the Straight Science audience, because it's never easy to be a public speaker. I believe it or not, I still get nervous. And so let's show Brynn some love in the chat for taking her time and taking time out of her busy schedule to come after work and give us all the latest on muskox in the region. With that, we've got a question in the chat, and that was from Peter Carey. And Peter Carey is actually calling internationally. He's down in, I want to say New Zealand, Peter Carey. I'm sorry if that's Australia. You'll set us straight on that one. And he wants to know, is this population harvested?
Yes, we do harvest muskox from this population. It is a tier 2 hunt by and large, which is to say that it's primarily hunted by subsistence users that reside within the region. And it is only males currently that are harvested. We only allow for a bull harvest. Oh, I take that back. 2 years ago, we opened up a cow harvest near Nome. So this is the second year that a small number of cows can be harvested. Hunters have the choice of harvesting either a cow or a bull if they have that particular tag.
Maybe I can just unmute myself at this point for questions. How about that? I don't want to get a feedback loop though.
Maybe we're okay if this is truly broken, which I think it is. That's good. All right, so before Ramey, I see your hand is up. I do want to say we have a caller on the line, and callers get priority at a Straight Science, because if you're on a telephone, it's terrible to be a caller on a Zoom. You can't wave your hand or unmask yourself. So if the caller at any time, I do see we have a caller from Alaska, just voice up at any time and we will take your call. You're a priority because it's sort of a bit of a disadvantage. And Peter Carey is from New Zealand. So there you go.
Awesome.
All right. And Ramey, go ahead. Looks like you have
Hey,
a question.
Brynn. Nice work. It's really interesting. Thanks for the
We
presentation.
cannot hear you.
Oh man. Ah,
Oh,
We
maybe
can
it's
hear him fine on Zoom.
mine too.
Yeah, online can hear him.
Oh,
I hear him
hello.
through yours.
okay. I'm actually getting it. Can you, Ramey,
Okay.
can you try again?
Yeah. Thanks, Brynn. Really interesting. Appreciate it. I have 3 very brief questions. One was, I may have missed it, but you purposely colored females from different groups. I know you said they changed groups, but groups at the time.
Yes. Feedback is bad.
Yeah.
We did intentionally collar muskox from different groups. They certainly did mix and come back together, but our rule is that we only collar one from a group at a time. We've had not such great luck if we try to collar a second cow out of the group at the same time. That second capture never seems to go as smooth when we do it. So for the last, I would say 4 years, we've held pretty steady to that one muskox out of a group at a time rule.
Okay.
Okay.
And so what is the max travel distance per day that you've seen? Do you remember off the top of your head? Sorry, everybody's muted. I can't hear anything. Can anyone else online here?
I
This is
can hear
Wes.
you,
I can hear
Racy.
you just fine.
Okay. Are you able to hear anyone else? Are they answering? I can't hear the answer.
No,
It looks like Brynn and Gay have their mics muted. I assume that's what's going on. Somebody needs to
We
unmute.
can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. We weren't able to hear you. Sorry.
Technical difficulty.
Yeah.
You'd think we've done this before.
You'd think.
Sorry, go ahead, Raymond. What's your next question?
Oh, so yeah, do you know off the top of your head what the maximum mileage per day?
I have not looked at per day yet. That would be an
Okay.
interesting thing to look at.
Yeah. And finally, just wondering if you have any plans to like overlay ecological or like ecological layers, like to look at movement and habitat characteristics on the map.
It's all on the table. This is fairly
Yeah.
preliminary. Yeah. First of all, we wanted to see if the GPS collars worked, and they seem like they do. So yes, at some point in the future, we would like to start looking at anything and everything that we can.
Really cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We have a question right here, which
Okay.
you're gonna have to repeat online.
I will.
On the map, where is the lava fields at?
Excellent question. She asked where the lava fields were at. So let me see if I can back up. Uh-oh. We'll use this one. The lava fields, I believe, are out here, just to the east of Emmerich Lake, if I remember correctly.
And they're using that?
I haven't seen any of them use it yet. Again, we don't have too much caller data up there. And they don't seem like they get documented there during the abundance survey, but they're around there in the summertime as we transition through. We'll certainly see them kind of in the area.
You have a question?
Hmm.
Go for it.
Alicia.
So from the original release of the two different groups on this in your 1992 survey, was that your anticipated population growth from the two releases to 1992 when the survey was done?
So for those online, she asked with the 1992 survey, if the minimum count that we see here was the expected growth after the two releases, correct? Okay, I would say we expected growth. I don't know that we had a set amount in mind, a rate at which we expected them to grow. And the first years, we certainly just wanted to let them go and see what happened. And so we monitored them from 1970 to 1992. It just wasn't as consistent, which is why I didn't include it here. But we did see the numbers gradually increasing every time we went out. That's what I got for you.
All right, any other questions online? Oh, a phone caller wants to know how to unmute. *6 for the caller. Or you can dial my cell phone. It's tough being sometimes it glitches. So you could do 907. You have a pencil phone caller, 434-1149. And we'll take your question right here. 907-434-1149. All right.
I did see a couple other questions popping.
I think you're good. So far.
Oh, Jim had one. I heard there were about a half a dozen muskox on Sledge Island a while back, and he's still there if that was true. We also heard that, and we have seen them out there, and as of last summer, they were still out there. I don't think we've gone back out and flown this fall, but as of last summer, they were still there. So I assume they're still there because there hasn't been ice to allow them to walk off yet.
Okay, and you have the question from the caller is, can you ask how they collar the animals? How do you separate the animal from the herd so that the people, putting the collars on don't get hurt or, bothered, attacked? How do you collar them? Catch them and collar them. Thank you, caller.
That is an excellent question. If we're on the ground, we have a team of folks that encircle the group, that makes the group circle up. And then we just wait as the muskox shuffle around for that one individual that we want to present itself and provide an opportunity to shoot the dart. After we dart the animal, she just walks back into the group, and the drugs will overpower her ability to control her ability to stand up. So she'll just lay down. And once we see that, the group of folks that are surrounding the herd will come together on one side, and we'll just gently walk towards the group. And that group doesn't like us, so they will walk away. It's a slow process. We're not rushed at any point. We're not making loud noises. It's just a very slow and controlled environment when we're doing it from the ground. So we don't have that issue. If we're darting from the air, we're looking for, especially in the last couple of years where we're recoloring, we're looking for that particular ear tag. So we can hover above the group with the helicopter and kind of look straight down at them, and we'll see that color ear tag hanging off. We know if it's supposed to be on the right or the left ear. So we know which animal we're targeting. And then as we come down in with the helicopter, the pilots are really good at getting behind the animal that we want, and we'll dart her. And then we'll back off with the helicopter, and they'll come together like they do on the ground and group up. And eventually that cow will succumb to the immobilization drugs and lay down. And then we are able to use the helicopter. We'll pick up and we'll just very slowly approach with the helicopter. And the muskox don't like that either. So the ones that are not darted will gradually walk off, or sometimes they'll run away, leaving the cow on the ground by herself. So it's very slow. It's a little faster with the helicopter, but it's a very slow environment. And we're always trying to just watch the animal and read their responses to us.
And caller, let me know if I got your message, so let me know if there's follow-up for that question. So thanks for asking it. Wes, I see you on, go ahead.
My question was, so the dots you on your screen, specifically the last like the 21 map that you showed, the dots that are out, I was really curious of the dots that would have been way up in 26, or the dots that were in the east out of our unit there. Were those groups or individuals, or would you have any sense of that?
Both. I don't know off the top of my head which was which, but I do know that we've documented solo bulls out there. We've documented just little groups of bulls, so groups of like 2 or 3 mature bulls together. And we also, especially in the Mulatto Hills there, those southern group of dots, we've documented mixed groups. So it's certainly adults that are reproducing are moving out there. Both parties that are needed are out there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Ramy, it would be interesting to see a graph of growth over time. I don't think I have that. I have it. I just don't think I put it as part of this presentation.
Next time.
Yes, I can put it in next time for sure.
Actually, I did have a question thanks for taking another question.
Sure.
If one of your answers prompted another question. So you said like it was difficult to get more callers in one group. I'm curious, do you still have that difficulty if you were to do it at a completely different time? Is it yeah.
Like a year later?
Yeah, like is it
no.
an issue to have 2 callers in one group, or it's just the timing issue?
It's just when we're trying to deploy the caller. So even if we're on the ground or in a helicopter, regardless of how we're trying to dart that animal, it seems like the rest of the group still gets pretty riled up from it. And so we'll work the first animal, and then when we attempted to do a second one out of the group, it took longer for the animal to go down. Their temperature was always higher. Their respiration rates were always higher.
Yeah, totally.
It was just a much more rushed. It felt more rushed because the animal wasn't reacting as nicely to the immobilization drugs.
Yeah,
and
they already worked up, so.
Yeah, so
Gotcha.
we'll come back to that group if we need to the next year, but we won't do 2 out of a group in the same year. When we did the neonate project, we would catch one as a neonate, and then we would catch it again in the fall. But with the adults, it's 1 per year per group.
Awesome, thanks.
Peter online, have the Seward Peninsula animals spread out far enough to mix with muskox from the uniliquete population? The uniliquete muskox, there was a farm there. I'm not sure if that's what you were talking about. The ones that were stationed in uniliquete at a farm got moved eventually to Palmer. So the muskox now that are on the Seward Peninsula seem like they've been the ones that have marched over and make up all of the dots that you see on the map right now. There is the potential that some of the muskox from Nelson Island in Southwest Alaska have walked off the island and also moved up. So there might be a little bit of mixing going on there, but I don't think any of them are from the uniloclete ones, because my understanding was that all of the uniloclete muskox were captive. Oh, you meant Nelson Island. Yes, maybe on the southern end. Yes, Nelson Island. I think there might be some mixing. We do have a genetics project in the works. I don't know when we'll have results from that, but we are trying to see if we can genetically differentiate the populations. All of the muskox in Alaska stemmed from 36 from Greenland, and all of them were put on Nunivak Island, and then all of Nunivak Island was used to repopulate these different areas. And it's only been roughly 50 years since the Seward Peninsula population was reintroduced. So it might not be enough time, genetically speaking, to see changes in the different populations, but we are looking into that. And hopefully in a couple of years, I'll have results for that too. Austin Online, what if anything can be concluded about their movements related to climate change? Excellent question, and I don't know yet. A lot of this movement data is still pretty new. We haven't yet tried to overlap movement with big weather events like the ice that we currently have on the Seward Peninsula. So nothing at the moment, and I apologize for that.
Well, actually, I'm gonna say, Austin, you and I were thinking along the same lines, because my question I said earlier was a weather question. And I have a selfish question, and that is, I often am flying maybe sometimes along the coast looking for dead animals. And we always see up by the Coast Guard station, there's a large group of muskox, usually way up by the Coast Guard base, right up at the very end. Where the Port Clarence, yeah,
Okay.
where the Coast Guard station used to be. All those buildings up there, right kind of across from Point Spencer, I guess you'd call it, across west of Brevic. And, Murbach came in 2022. And I don't know, we had a super high flood. We had 12 feet of water, 10 feet of water, storm surge come up through there, maybe even more up there. And I was kind of wondering, how are those muskox on top of the wave action? It's so sea level there. Were you able to see? That's just kind of one selfish question. Did they get wiped out? Because we would fly after the Murbach and there were so few muskox. I just wondered, there were so many, like you go up there and there's probably 60 or 80 Muskoxen. And after that storm, I don't know if they just walked out or.
We didn't document any.
Another one too.
Yeah, we didn't document any mortalities from that. We didn't come across any carcasses that had washed up on land anywhere, and none of our callers went on mortality after the Murbach came through. So my best educated guess is that they just walked off before the storm, or as the storm was rolling in. They walked across down around the peninsula and then back up onto taller hills to get away from it.
All right. Now that's good, because the Pathfinder Aviation fellows that went over there on their way to the Diomede, they actually said they saw, well, there was about 4 and they were up on the stairs of the Coast Guard building. So they had there were some that had rode it out, I guess. But I don't know about everyone else. So that's good. And then right now, for those of you who know Nome, we just are having a heck of a warm December. And we've had a heck of a warm December, meaning we had 4 days of rain, 45 degrees, 40 and above. So we are down to pretty much no snowpack here in Nome at this, 3 days out from solstice. So we have no snowpack. You couldn't snow machine right now unless you were up in the hills. I mean, anything to speak of. It's sort of a dusting. And I noticed that we did the Christmas bird count here this weekend with the people from Nome, and the muskox are actually down on the flats. They're down off the Cougar Rock Road on the east side, kind of by across from the dump on the east side of the road. And I was, it startled me because it was kind of dark, and I wondered if that's something that now, when I don't know what the ice conditions or how high that rain went up in elevation, if that's driven them down again, or if it's such good feed, why be up there and be hungry when all the grasses are available right now, as old as they are, but even so. You any thoughts on that? I think that's a climate change that Austin knew we were on the same trail there, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, we have not seen the migration up to higher elevations yet. Which
Okay.
maybe migration is the wrong word, but we haven't seen the muskox moving up the hills. They've stayed kind of lower throughout this fall, and I think that is a result of the fact that we don't have deep snow down low yet. There is the ice, which is annoying for humans, but I think muskox are still able to paw through it. The little bit of tundra that I've walked out in, it doesn't seem like the ice is as hard packed around the willows either. So if they're in those willows, I think it's easier for them to get down to the grasses. Plus they do eat willows. So there's good vegetation everywhere they are now, so they don't necessarily have a need yet to get up into the windswept areas.
Yeah, it's just a different time. And tonight it's 30 degrees. For those of you out of Nome that know Nome, it's a 30-degree December,
That is
mid,
crazy.
mid to late December night tonight. And then here's a wild card question, for my world. Is there any, and maybe there's not at all, but the word avian influenza keeps popping up in my day today for lots of reasons, But one of the things is there, we know it's in fox here. We know that it can get into marine mammals. I know we had the rabid moose, but do we have to worry about avian influenza or maybe even rabies in our muskox? What would that, do we have to worry about that? I don't know.
Well, technically any mammal can get rabies. I think muskox are likely to be a little more unlikely to contract it just because they have such dense fur that if a fox were to try to bite a muskox's leg around the hoof or something, it's pretty hard to get to the skin itself. I'm not going to say impossible because it is a mammal, but I would think that that would be pretty difficult. In terms of avian influenza, one of the things that we test for every year, we'll take nasal swabs if the captures are going well. And we do send it out for a variety of testing. And because avian influenza has been documented here, I am 99% sure that that's something our wildlife vet is looking for and hasn't seen it yet.
Wonderful. So that's awesome. Thank you. That is more than I anticipated. So that's terrific. With that, Peter. Hi, Peter. What is the expected life of the GPS collar compared to the expected life of cows, or how many successive GPS collars are needed to follow the full life of a muskox? Estimates, of course.
Ooh, that's a good question. The guaranteed life on our GPS collars is 7.5 years, with the ones that we deployed in 2021. The company that I work with that manufactures the collars have actually updated things, and they told me with this last batch of collars we ordered that the expected life of that collar is actually 10 years. It's the same company that we ordered VHF collars from back in the day, and those collars always lasted well beyond the guaranteed life. So in theory, they should last well beyond the 7 years or 10 years that are guaranteed when we put them out. As far as the expected life of a cow, it seems like in the teens is pretty common. We had one cow that was initially collared in 2008 as an adult who died in the summer of 2023. She died last year. So she was a minimum of 19 years old. So estimates would be 2, maybe 3 collars to follow a single animal through its entire life.
And this is on the chat, is the caller had another question.
Okay.
It's here.
Jim?
Yeah.
Okay. Are muskox multiplying more rapidly than moose? If so, why? Could muskox be more successful at defending against predators than moose are? I don't know if they're multiplying more rapidly. In terms of just sheer numbers, muskox only have 1 calf a year. Twins are extremely rare. Viable twins are even more rare, while moose can produce twins or triplets in a year. Survival rate, varies. We've seen with the neonate juvenile survival, neonate survival with muskox, it ranged from 2% in a year we had a lot of capture mortalities up to 61% the last year we did it. The 2 years that we did a moose survival study on the neonates, I want to say survival was about 13% both years. Maybe, I'm not as familiar with that data. So I don't know. That's a really hard question to answer. Could muskox be more successful at defending against predators? They have very different strategies. Moose are more likely to run, while muskox are more likely to stand their ground. I don't know, man, a kick from a moose can be pretty devastating, and obviously a blow from a muskox horn can maybe not kill a predator right away, but could cause a wound that turns septic and kills it down the road. So I don't know. That is an excellent question, and I'm sorry I don't have a better answer.
But I'm going to say, but we are going to have a straight science by Sarah Hensley, who's going to be giving us the ADF&G moose, latest news of moose in the region. So hold that question. That's a good question. Which one is better, is doing better and has a better rate of survival? Good question, whoever. Thank you. With that, it says you just don't see that rapid increase in moose, right? So
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions? Brynn's been knocking them out of the park, and lots of good questions. Very fun for her, I'm sure, to be put through the paces on her muskox knowledge. Always good. If not, going once, going twice. We will see you all in the new year. I hope it's a good year for us all, and ring out 2024 on and onwards and upwards into 2025. We'll see you in the new year. Everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight. Have a good night, and thank you guys for coming too. Great.